$200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES.
Only on the Super NES.
You're listening to the SNES broadcast with your hosts, Soul Blazer.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Super NES Podcast, episode number 138, coming at you this time. As always, I'm Greg, one of your co-hosts of the podcast, and I say one of the co-hosts because we're in a bit of flux right now. As you may know, if listening to our past episode, George, my other longtime co-host, has, because of real life obligations, had to step back from the podcast on a regular basis. George will still be coming on the episodes every now and then as a guest host. But he just simply does not have time to be with us anymore on a regular basis. He's gonna be missed. George has been a very good and steady co-host for us over the years, so I very much appreciate all the support and everything he's done for us over the years. As of right now, George has still agreed to edit the podcast. That may change for later on, but so again, I want to thank him very doubly much for all that and for his help. We're in the process of trying to figure out who will take George's place. Like on the podcast, so a few people expressed interest. One of them was Ray, who joined us last episode for the Pure Instinct podcast, and another person who expressed interest on the podcast is my special co-host that I have with me on this episode, Randy. So hello, Randy. How's it going?
Pretty good, sir. How are you doing?
Doing very well, thank you. Thank you again very much for taking time to be on the episode with me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So Randy brought a game to the table for us to talk about, which we'll get into here in a moment. As a way of intro, I usually ask anybody who joins the podcast these same questions, Randy. So yeah, it's like you're not being singled out. First of all, I'm curious to hear about your history and the background with Super NES. How you came to the system, etc.
Sure. So I was born in 87, so I think the NES or the SNES was what, 94, 95?
91 for US.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah,
well,
yep. So
I'm off to a great start. So
no, that's
anyway,
fine.
So yeah, that would make sense then, because I was probably about 5 when I got my first console, and I got the console that was packaged with Super Mario World. So right off the bat, I was kind of in probably one of the greatest games ever.
Yes. Yep.
But yeah, so I pretty much grew up with the SNES, and it was my faithful game console until I got my Nintendo 64. So
this was your very first system?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, cool. Yeah. So, that's interesting. To have somebody, it has to be like the perspective of coming from my prime kiddie age, because I was already a teenager by the time the system came out. So,
gotcha.
The Super NES was the first major purchase that I made on my own, my own money. So,
oh, okay, awesome.
So I was when I got it for Christmas '91. I was I was 15, almost going on 16 at that point. So
okay.
So the NES for me was like my kiddie system. So that's the one I really had. When I was younger. So
gotcha. Okay.
But besides Mario World and besides obviously this game we're going to be talking about in this episode, what are some of your favorite games of the system?
Oh boy, I've always been a huge fan of Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Kong Quest.
It's a fun game, yeah.
Yes.
Graphically the game is gorgeous.
I love the soundtrack to it too.
Music very good too. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, Rare's always made like good games.
And speaking of that, the Mario RPG was
Fun game, yes.
Yeah.
It's a little hard to get back to these days, I think, because like modern like gaming, modern gaming tastes. We covered the game on our podcast like a couple of years ago, and I played it, enjoyed it when it was new. It's like just one of those games that I think is a little. I think in some ways, in some ways, like it's not aged very well. But the Paper Mario series, I think, which is the spiritual sequels to that game. Those games are great.
Yeah, they really are.
So what else?
Gradius 3 was another fun game.
Yep, fun game.
I don't think I saw the end of World 1 on that game for a really long time. And then I also got the big Bazooka Super Scope pretty quick after it, so I had to play some Yoshi Safari, which I have very fond memories of.
Yep, those are all games that covered so far. Yoshi Safari is very weird, but it's a fun game, like what it is. So, I mean, like whoever thought of like Mario shooting enemies in the back of a Yoshi like a bazooka?
Right.
It's like some really crazy stuff going on there. Good games. Anything else come to mind like right now?
Oh boy. Other than what we're gonna talk about today, no, not off the top of my head. I'm sure there's a ton of them. I'm blanking right now.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. So, there's like good games. I guess the system, the system certainly has a lot of great games. Like for me, personally, over the years, I think that because I was already established gamer at that point, I really, I really gravitated towards sequels. New games and new games and franchises I already was playing and loving. So
gotcha.
I certainly have a very strong nostalgia like for those games. Like for example, you already mentioned Gradius 3. That's a great game. Zelda: Link to the Past is still my favorite Zelda game. Period. Hands down.
Yeah, how did I forget about that one?
Super Castlevania 4 is an awesome game. Just like a really great Castlevania game.
Yep.
Super Mario World is my favorite Mario game, period. Like you already mentioned, Super Metroid, awesome follow-up to the original NES game. So,
okay.
I also enjoy like Harvest Moon a lot. That's a great game. That's a franchise. That's a franchise that I played a lot over the years.
I never really got exposed to that until the GameCube, so I've never had the.
Yeah, so. Yeah, the Super NES game is very good. For a Super NES game, it's surprisingly deep. There actually is a lot to do in that game. So,
okay.
Actraiser was also a game I loved a lot. A very unique mix of like platforming, like city building. So.
Okay. Yep.
And speaking of city building, SimCity on the system was great. That's they took the original PC game, like, and added onto it greatly. So.
Gotcha.
That's a very fun game. Turtles. Turtles in Time.
Right, that was the fourth one, right?
Yep. Yeah. So, being a Turtles fan. Oh, Contra 3, of course. That's a great game.
Yep. Yoshi's Island, Super Mario World 2.
Yoshi's Island, I like in theory, but the biggest problem I have with that game, I can't play the game. The game itself is fun. The music is great. The graphics definitely are very good, but that crying baby just drives me up a freaking wall.
Yeah.
I cannot stand that. It's like, ugh. That just ruins the game for me, like right there. So,
yeah, that's fair.
There's a there's a more obscure late game there are some more obscure later game later series games the system that I really enjoyed, like for example a Soul Blazer is an interesting take on the action platformer franchise. Of course the RPGs, like I'm a big RPG fan, so it's like Final Fantasy 3, Final Fantasy 6, Secret of Mana, Chrono Trigger, I had all those games. So,
okay.
But Yeah, always been a big RPG fan. Squaresoft certainly was in their prime during the during that time period.
Yeah, especially with Mario RPG. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yep. They helped make they helped Nintendo make it. So, but and doing this podcast, it's like with a library this big, I knew there were a lot of games out there I had not played, like I've been exposed to. But doing this podcast has been great in the sense of both revisiting older games and also discovering new ones.
Okay.
And your game is perfect for perfect for that case because I never heard of this game. So, what game did you bring to the table for us to talk about in this episode, Randy?
So I brought The Adventures of Dr. Franken to the table.
Which is a pretty obscure, I'd say, probably, action platformer game, developed by a company called Motive Time Limited and published by DTMC, which got released, as far as I can tell, in North America only in December of 1993. So, how'd you come across this game then, Randy?
So growing up, I was always a huge fan of the Universal monsters, the old school 30s
right,
movies.
Okay, yep.
So
okay.
I was just in my local Toys R Us one day, probably close to my birthday or something, and just happened to see the cover art for this game, which is the Frankenstein monster running away from a bunch of enemies with sunglasses and stuff, and it just blew my little my little mind. So picked it up and grabbed it, and that's kind of how I came across it.
Okay. So are you a fan of platformers in general?
No, I'd say I'm pretty comfortable with platformers. I guess since those were my first games, that's kind of what I generally go to right next to RPGs.
Right. So you play the Kirby games and everything else like that then, right?
Yep. Oh yeah.
Okay. All right. So, my experience of this is a little bit different, mostly because that, when I was a kid, on the NES, I definitely was a huge platformer fan because, the NES, Super NES, both had a ton of platformers available for them because they were staple and during this time period, the mid 80s, the mid 90s, platformers were a huge thing. Mm-hmm. By Super NES days, I played some platformers. I played the best ones, but but by then I was kind of falling out of favor with them, and just by the time I got to the PlayStation, I was just I have no interest in platformers period anymore. So
gotcha.
I played very few of them since then. So this is a game that I wasn't consciously staying away from. I stay away from. I just never. I honestly never heard of it. Having said that, I don't think I would have picked the game for the podcast otherwise because of the fact that it is a platformer.
Gotcha. And you were probably at the age where you were thinking platformers are kids games, right?
Well, with a couple exceptions.
Right.
ActRaiser, for example, I mentioned before. That was a very gritty, pretty tough platformer as far as that the platform stages that go. So, right. It wasn't a hard and fast rule, but yes, a game like this that you have to admit it does look very kiddie.
Right. Oh yeah,
definitely
absolutely.
Definitely would have it almost feels like that there should be tie-in with a cartoon or something because the graphics look at everything. So.
Yeah, no, I totally get that.
So, not only did I not know anything about this game, I was also very surprised to find out to research for this that I was actually part of part of a franchise.
Yeah.
Not a very long lasting franchise, but there were two Game Boy games. One that also used Dr. Franken character. One came before and one came after.
Yeah.
The first game was called Dr. Franken in 1992. That game was released on the Game Boy, the NES, on the Game Gear, and it introduces both Dr. Franken and also some of the characters who show up in this game, such as his girlfriend Betsy for example. Mm-hmm. So that game kind of where all the stuff starts.
Right.
So have you played that one?
I've never played that specific one. I've seen videos of it.
I played a little bit of it on the NES. It seems like a very competent game. So,
okay.
obviously the handheld versions suffer a little bit because of the smaller screen and whatnot. So
Right.
But and then so this game came out in '93, like I mentioned, and then finally there was a direct sequel to the Game Boy game, Dr. Franken 2, in 1997.
Right.
And that was Game Boy only. And that one also was set in the same overall world, the same characters, the same idea or whatnot. It still blows my mind. I wasn't aware of this consciously back then, but I am now. It's like, they were still doing black and white Game Boy games in '97. It's like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
I forget the Game Boy Color came out when 96, I think 97, something like that. But
I want to say something like that.
So there's definitely toward the end of the end of that lifespan of like black and white Game Boy games. Having said that, this game looks fine, but definitely takes advantage of the hardware.
Yeah, I definitely think the Super NES game is definitely the cream of the franchise.
So these companies that developed and published the game, they're pretty obscure. They're pretty obscure. I had a hard time finding any information out there about these companies. About these companies. Period. Here's what I was able to find. Motive Time Limited, the developers of this game, was active from 1990 to 19. It was actually active making games for a long time, from 1990 to 2000. It looks like. And during that time span, they made games for numerous systems. They supported the Amiga, the NES, the Atari ST, the Game Boy, Genesis, the NES, the Super NES, obviously, the PlayStation.
Oh wow.
And the computer, PC. So they mostly did ports of games, like for example, but they also handled a lot of like licensed properties, and some of their games are very highly thought of. Like for example, they produced the Amiga and the Atari ST versions of like Gremlins 2, the new batch. They handled the Game Boy, NES, Super NES conversions of Dragon's Lair, for example.
Oh, okay.
They handled the Paperboy conversion on Genesis. They did Prince of Persia like the NES.
Okay.
Just to mention some of their games. So like not too many original games. I guess you could say Dr. Franken was one of their like few original original properties. Most of their bread and butter was on making like licensed games like ports or ports or whatnot.
Okay.
So the publisher DTMC was not active for very long, from what I could find. They only published games from 1992 to 1994. All of them North America only. They published games for the Game Boy, the Super NES, and the. Did I saw one other system? Nope, just the Game Boy, Super NES. Okay, so.
Oh wow.
So they published games like California Games 2, the Super NES. They published a Rama game for the Super NES as well. They published. I remember this character. I assume this is based off the same character. I may be totally wrong here, but the name makes me. The name of the game makes me makes me think it is. Did you ever have a Reed as a kid like Techno Power?
Yeah.
Do you remember like the character Lester?
Yeah.
They published a Super NES game called Lester the Unlikely. So,
okay.
I'm assuming it's the same Lester because Lester's not a very popular name, and Lester did get featured in a Virtual Boy game. So
was it Lester or Nestor?
Well, it was a. Actually, I think you're right. Nestor was the character's name, so never mind. So, it probably wasn't it. So, it's a very strange name. So, yeah, they weren't. The track record publishing games is not very good. So,
Gotcha.
What I can see on here in the see here in the list. So, Dr. Franken, of course, obviously, we need to talk about it a little bit. Dr. Franken obviously is based upon the classic movie monster Frankenstein.
Right.
So,
Except cooler.
I'm assuming that because the character was changed around a bit, they didn't have to worry about they didn't have to worry about licensing it or paying the royalties or anything. So
It might have been public domain at that time too. I don't know if.
Yeah, I'm not sure because it's like it's kind of murky in those areas. Like for example, Dracula, the book's a public domain,
Right.
But the movie, but the character is protected by copyright because of the copyright these days because he's been featured in so many movies.
Right.
So, and obviously Castlevania is heavily inspired by Dracula. So,
Right.
I'm thinking that the developers probably were like, yeah, he's okay to use if we just make a few changes to him. So,
And maybe that's why they called it Dr. Franken or something.
right, exactly. So because obviously Franken, because they most people don't know this, but Frankenstein was the name of the doctor, not the monster.
Correct.
So, but the monster was unnamed from what I can recall. It's been a long time since I read the book, but that's my memory of it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they just refer to it as the monster or him or something like that.
So yeah, so I'm assuming they'd have to pay any. So yeah, I'm assuming either because it was public domain or because the character was changed enough, they didn't have to worry about any pesky lawsuits or whatnot making this. So, so this is your pretty typical action platformer game, in many ways. I really don't think this game, unless I missed something, unless I missed something, Randy, because you obviously have a lot more experience. You experience this game than I do, but my time playing it, I didn't see any surprises or twists that this game does.
Honestly, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just to say, it seems a very competent basic platformer.
The only thing that really surprised me throughout the whole game was the fact that there wasn't a boss fight anywhere in
That's
it.
true. Yes, yeah. So again, like I said before, this game really does. This game really does kind of seem kid friendly, mostly because of the fact that there are some individual enemies who you're difficult to fight, but you're right, there are no boss fights per se.
Right.
So the game, the game screen's pretty basic. You have this is a 2-player game, right? I didn't see a 2-player option.
If it was, I never played the 2-player. I think it was. Well, I take that back. Maybe it was, and you just took turns playing the level.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's so because it does show who's playing 1 or 2 up on the screen. So,
okay.
It shows you. So it shows you basically your the game screen shows you your hit points left, your score, number of lives, number of items that you have picked up, current time left, that kind of stuff. So, Dr. Franken, as you mentioned before, is very interestingly portrayed in this game. He's a character, all right.
Yeah, he really is.
It's hard to describe him. I think it's like a massive Franken head on top of kid body. It's kind of he's kind of what it reminded me of.
Yeah, he's almost the proportions are almost like Beavis and Butthead style.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So, but so he's nicely graphically defined. I mean, you can see you see his trademark eyes. The scars on his face. That tank top haircut that he had.
Right, the bolts out of his neck.
Right, yeah. So, definitely recognizable for what he is. So, the shirt and shorts he wears, plays a nice touch.
And the flip flops, don't forget those.
And the flip flops, yes. Because he's supposed to be on vacation. So,
I mean, this is also vintage 90s look too, right?
Right, yeah. So, like most platform games, does this have a plot, like a plot with it? Like it's very basic. It's a very it's a very basic plot. You really, you really are exposed to it, like read the manual or whatnot. But basically, this game is Dr. Franken has the idea of taking a vacation like this girlfriend Bitsy. But Bitsy doesn't have a passport. So Frankie, not being the sharpest tool in the shed, because of course he's a monster without a brain,
right.
Decides the best way to get around that is just to take Bitsy apart, and mail her parts individually to New York City. And then he'll go there normally, and I guess the idea is to assemble her once he gets out the packages back like in the post office. So of course the post office being what the post office is, some of the packages get mislaid, and so he goes on a quest around the world trying to find the missing parts of his girlfriend. So that's why you're going around the world.
Right. So
there's a map that the game shows you. Between stages. So,
yeah, like the overworld screen.
Yep. So they go around various. You go around to various countries like the world. They try to reproduce the look of the countries a little bit. To be honest, I don't think they did a great job. There is variety in the stages. Don't get me wrong. Just the stages, the stages just feel like generic. You feel like generic background stage A, generic background stage B, as opposed to being like England or America or Japan or whatever.
Yeah,
so,
I feel like the only ones they spent a lot of time and really developed were the Japan stages and maybe the New York stage, but other than that, it just feels really generic, like you said.
Yes. So yeah, they missed a golden chance there for that, I think, unfortunately, but Dr. Franken's also very large. His sprite's very detailed and pretty big, and that I think creates a problem sometimes because maybe you feel differently, but it's because he's so big, because Dr. Franken's so big, his hitbox is huge. It can be very hard to avoid taking damage sometimes.
Right.
So because Dr. Franken, I think he's so big, his hitbox is also pretty big. So I felt like it was very easy to take damage sometimes because of that.
Yeah, it's almost like you start running and can't stop quick enough before you take damage and hit somebody.
Right. Yep. So counting real quick here. The game actually has a pretty good amount of stages. There's about there's about 20 stages to go through in this game. So
right.
Just various parts around the world. So and you usually have 4 parts of Bitsy to find every stage. There's an icon. There's an icon at the bottom. There's an icon the bottom right of the graphic of the screen that'll show you how you're doing on that. So that's kind of your barometer of progress, as you go through the stage.
Right.
So the graphics themselves, we've already mentioned the generic stages. Having said that, even though stages are very generic looking, the graphics overall in this game are pretty good. They're not the best Super NES graphics. But for the most part, they get the job done.
Yeah, and there are some pretty decent details in there if you look down to it.
Sure. Yeah. Good use of colors. Everything's very recognizable, for what it is. It's a very they kind of present the overall game is kind of nighttime kind of creepish feel without really being over the top.
Right.
So, but the platforming is pretty good. Like I said, I think this game I really was not challenged all that much playing this game. There certainly are some difficult spots, but I think overall, this game definitely does feel aimed, kind of aimed toward younger gamers. So, I'm curious. Was it your first time? Revisiting this game again for the podcast. Was it your first time playing this? Playing this game for a while?
Yeah, it really was. I had probably haven't touched this game in 10, 15 years. I mean, it was when I had it as a kid.
What do you think about the gameplay of this game now versus back then?
Well, it's definitely as hard as I remember. I think one of the issues with the sprite being so big is, you get moving at such a clip, and then an enemy will pop on screen and you can't stop yourself without taking damage.
Oh, yeah, yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And also, I never noticed it as a kid, but you have that health bar up there.
Yes.
But when you get hit, it's not like you just lose one or two, one bar. It's like it'll drain like a quarter or a third of your
sure, exactly,
your health
right.
bar.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, it kind of did have the nostalgia factor, but I don't know. It's one of those, if I hadn't played it as a kid, I probably wouldn't mess with it now,
Did you find the game relatively easy to go through?
I don't. It wasn't really as easy as I remember it. I remember it being hard as a kid, but it definitely wasn't.
And as we get older, our skills are not as sharp as they used to be.
Right.
Plus also, a game like this is definitely, platformers are definitely highly memory highly memory sensitive.
Right.
I don't know. So I don't know if you have any experience with this. Experience like the Mega Man franchise, which is like the de facto gold standard as far as platformers go. But
right.
But yeah. If you don't play those games regularly, you definitely your skills to that game definitely fall off very quickly. So I think that applies to this game too, to some degree, just not quite to that same factor. So, So I found the game to be relatively, not easy, but definitely toward the easier part of platforming games goes. The biggest difficulty I had was actually the timer, because it's in some areas it really wasn't very clear where the parts were hidden. So there were there were definitely some stages where where I didn't run out of time, but I ran very close running out of time because I couldn't find the parts.
Gotcha.
So, did you encounter that problem to prominent degree?
Yeah, there were a couple stages. I think there was a cave stage or something where it only gave you, I want to say 2 minutes or something. Mm-hmm. And it was significantly less. And man, I was really close there at the end trying to. And then there was another one. I think it was an Aztec style game where you're trying to get hit by lightning, and the only way to find the parts is let the lightning hit and then run back and see if it uncovered anything,
Right.
And that one it took me a while to finish that up, and the timer was getting pretty low on.
Yep. Yeah, definitely for sure. So, but oh, cool. Okay. So just to finish the graphic, the graphical part. The enemies in this game are very varied. I think, however, they definitely are a very good selection of enemies. The enemies all look pretty good. They're all brightly colored. They're also, at least the game's fair. Your sprite's big. Their sprite's big.
Right.
So, the attacks Dr. Franken has are pretty basic. You have the headbutt, the kick. Good range, good damage. They're fine. So.
And then you have that Hadouken special move or whatever you can connect.
Oh yes, I never actually use that very much because I keep very much. Mostly because I just keep the mostly because I just kept the mostly because I just kept forgetting about it.
Right.
So. Was this a game that you beat back in the day, as a kid?
No. I got pretty far in it as a kid, but it just, I don't know. I think something else came out and I lost interest in it, and I just never finished it.
Yeah, well, you're not missing very much. Very much. The ending of this game is very basic.
Is it?
Yes. You're shown a one graphical scene of Dr. Franken trying to put Bitsy back together again, and she's like, she's like all wrong. She's like, she has like the head coming out of like one shoulder, the leg coming out of the another. The arm of the head is, and Dr. Franken's there looking at a diagram of the body, scratching his head, like going like, huh? But so. That's it. That's the whole ending.
But there wasn't a final boss or anything. It was just
no. There's just one last stage to go through, and that's it. So
that's so weird to me. I just feel like every game and every platformer game I've ever played has some type of boss.
Yeah,
in
it's
it.
it's very unusual in that sense for sure. I definitely agree with you about that. So, end of the end, you end it, and so unfortunately in the end, you went back up to Eastern Europe, so things don't even get to take your vacation. So there's that. But I guess just going around the world, Dr. Franken got his adventure done anyway. So, but if you know what you're doing, the game's not super long. Let's plays and whatnot on this game, and then on the game YouTube, they go through the entire game. They only clock in about like 45 minutes. So.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yes, if you know what you're doing. Like it's a pretty a pretty short game. So. What do you think about what do you think about the music of this game, Randy?
The music was kind of cool, especially the intro song.
Yep.
A couple of the levels, I think the first one, and then there's like a city level. I remember really liking the music too. I don't know. It fit the atmosphere of the game,
Yeah, sure. I would agree with that for sure. I mean, it's decent music. It's nothing like amazing, but it definitely. It definitely fits the overall theme of the game and how it sounds and everything. So, so the tracks very good. Good platform music. To play through. So.
Now, I do feel like the sound effects, like Franken, the monsters like kick and punching and stuff like that. His noises probably could have been reworked a little better because it just.
Yeah, sound effects are a bit weak.
Yeah.
You kind of get the idea that this game was not created by the most experienced Super NES programmers and team,
right? Or maybe they had a real tight time frame,
Yeah, something like that. But I mean, it's competent for what it is, sure. But it's like there definitely seem to be ways, the corners were cut as far as the actual production cycle of the game goes,
right?
So, but kind of getting toward our final thoughts here on this. Most of us have already said we thought about the game. This is an okay platformer. If you have a kid, for example, maybe your kids, Randy, this is a pretty decent old school platformer, a platform for a kid to play, I think, because not only because of the theme, but also because the game's not superly difficult.
Yeah, it's real accessible. You can just pick it up and go for it.
Yeah. So I think if you have somebody like that, I certainly can recommend this game. Otherwise, unless you're a big fan of Dr. Franken as a character, or for obscure platformers, it's a very beyond that, it's a very meh game, I think, as far as it's concerned. Not bad. There's nothing grievously wrong with it.
It's just not a hidden gem.
Right. Yeah, just a very competent, decent game that you're probably gonna play for a couple hours, be bored with, and move on.
Right.
So, so you've already shared your thoughts on this game. Now, nostalgia obviously has a big impact on things. Anything else come to mind as far as as far as your thoughts or experiences playing this game now versus your memories of playing as a kid?
Not really. Some of the enemies are a little weird. I mean, you obviously have to take some of that with a grain of salt in some of these games, but
right.
I get the ghosts and the reapers and stuff like that. But I think a couple of the levels, didn't they have vacuum cleaners or like
Yes. Yeah.
kind of weird stuff like that.
Yeah, there were traps. There were traps. Traps in some of the levels too. So, but I mean, nothing that kills you like immediately. No, unless you found it, unless you found out a pit or something. But so, but yeah, so I think you kind of summarized it, or you summarized it best earlier. Like you said, you didn't have an experience with this game as a kid. It was a game you probably wouldn't give a second look to. So,
right.
I think it's a pretty good summary of the game right there. So,
I mean, the one thing it does have going for it right now is I think it's still pretty cheap to come across. So
it is. Yes, we'll talk about it here in a moment.
Oh,
so,
sorry, I jumped on.
No, I know it's fine. Just like there's no, just gonna finish up by saying there's no cheat codes or hints or tips or anything like this game. Nothing hidden. So, not many reviews of the game. This game seems like it was pretty obscure. Probably got a very small print run because it wasn't a very big developer, wasn't a very big publisher. So, not a lot of copies were made. I cannot find any contemporary reviews of this. There have been some modern reviews of this game over the last couple of years, and yeah, most of them rank the game. Most of them rank the game solidly in mid territory. They give the game anywhere from 2 to 3 out of 5 stars.
Gotcha.
So just very run of the mill typical platformer stuff.
Pretty much what we were saying.
Right. So price is interesting with this game because it's usually with uncommon games like this they command high prices. But the thing about rare games is that if nobody appreciates the game being rare, i.e. nobody wants the game, the price is not going to reflect the game being rare, even if the game is rare. That makes sense. So it's even though this game I'm sure is not very common, the prices of this game are very low because I don't think many people, many folks are out there hunting for it on eBay.
Right.
So, there are copies there. There are copies of the game easy to find. I found 27 copies of this game being sold right now currently as the time of doing research. 10 copies that recently sold. Card only is very cheap. CIB is where it gets a bit more pricey. They're pricier, but that's typical for Super NES games. These prices all include shipping by the way. If you want this game card only, the prices of sold copies range anywhere from $7.50 to $10.75. So,
which for a Super NES game, it's not bad.
It's cheap, yes. So CIB even is not that bad. The CIB prices range wildly depending upon how good a quality the copy is.
Right.
CIB copies range sold anywhere from $30 all the way up to $135.
Okay.
So, so CIB. But CIB pricing tends to be more expensive anyway. So those prices still are not that crazy.
Yeah, no, not at all.
So always fun to check out check out a hidden game in the system I really didn't know about. So like I said, not a bad game. Not a great game, I think, but a very for what it is, a very decent basic platformer game. So, right. I imagine. So, from what I saw, the gameplay of the other Dr. Franken games, looks very similar. So, they're probably kind of the same formula as this one is.
Right. The video I saw on the Game Boy version, he was just throwing lightning bolts, but.
Yeah. So, but a decent game. You have any final thoughts about the game, or any other memories or stories, whatnot that you want to share about it, Randy?
Not really, other than just the box art for the game looked really cool, which is what
the box art is nice. Yes, I forgot to mention that. It's a good call. So the box art's very graphical.
Yeah. Other than that, I mean, it's like I said, if I hadn't played it in my childhood, like I said before, I probably wouldn't really go after it consciously right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but yeah, so not a bad platformer for kids though. I think I think it's like a pretty pretty good old school platformer game as far as young ones are concerned. So it has that going for it.
Right.
So anyway, we thank you as always for listening to the podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, comments, etc., feel free to check us out either on a Facebook page, or you can also send me an email if you want to. The email for that is the SNES podcast at yahoo.com. We also have a Patreon page at www.patreon.com/the SNES podcast, or if it's a little $1 a month, you can get some cool perks such as being shouted out in the episode, like I'm doing right now for Corey and David. Thank you very much, guys, for your the guys for your support. You can also get perks such as early access to the podcast, or being able to dictate the game for us. So, Randy, you have a podcast too that you're on, right?
Yeah, so I'm a co-host on the Canned Air podcast. We focus on comics and pop culture.
Okay.
So we're syndicated now on a Cuyahoga Valley radio network.
Cool.
But we've been around about 6 years. I just joined about a year ago. But yeah, it's a little bit more adult oriented than, not as family friendly as this podcast is, but we have a lot of fun doing it.
What's something that you covered recently that you think the listeners of this podcast might be interested in?
So we just had the creator of Chacon the Forever Man, Robert Krause, on. We do a lot of indie guests as well as some celebrities. Like we had the voice of Bowser, the new.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, yep.
So yeah, it's a little bit different every week, and we usually take like a topic from pop culture, like our favorite sci-fi movies or our favorite villains, stuff like that, and we just talk about it and for about 40 minutes, and then spend about 20 minutes talking to our guest. So
cool, okay. And where can the podcast be found at?
Just go to www.cannedairpodcast.com.
Cool, awesome. Anything else that you're working on that you want to plug?
So I'm a co-organizer for the Torg Gaming Expo here in Central Ohio. It's a big video game, toy, comic, podcast, and cosplay convention that's going to be held May 30th of this year. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Cool. All right. Well, Randy, I want to thank you again very much for taking the time to be on the podcast. As I mentioned before, Randy was one of 3 people who expressed interest in taking David. Yeah, I'll be okay. I keep thinking like David and George mixed up today. Duh. Interested in taking George's place in the podcast. I'm hoping to make a decision on that soon. Because of that, I can't really give any details about the details of the next episode. So, stay tuned. We will hash it out again shortly and get the podcast back on a more regular, established, scheduled routine. So I appreciate everybody. I appreciate everybody's patience out there while we go through these growing pains. Shifting through going through co-host organizations is never fun like an easy process. So, but we will be back at you shortly with another episode. Randy, as I said before, thank you very much for taking the time to be on the podcast with us. We always appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. Sorry for the technical issues.
Yep, no problem. So, regardless of what happens, Randy, I'm sure, we'll be back in the podcast later on. So look forward to hearing more from him. So, thank you again, everybody, for listening as always, and take care of yourselves. We'll catch you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power.
Superpower.